A continuación, Broadway adopta nuevas tradiciones y vuelve a inventarse a sí mismo durante los años 60 y 70. Desde West Side Story a Hair, desde Cabaret a Chorus Line, todo en Broadway, el musical americano. Hola, soy Julie Andrews. En la década de 1960, el musical tradicional americano perdió el paso cuando la música de rock, el movimiento de derechos civiles y la guerra de Vietnam tuvieron un profundo efecto en la cultura estadounidense. Pero, comenzando con West Side Story, el talento creativo de una nueva generación volvió a imaginar lo que el musical podía hacer. Compositores como Stephen Sondheim, John Kander y Fred Ebb, junto con directores como Hal Prince, Bob Fosse y Michael Bennett, crearon asombrosas obras nuevas, nuevos sonidos y una nueva y atrevida tradición para Broadway.
What I like best about West Side Story is it's an amalgam of book, music, lyrics, and dance. In that sense, it's a remarkable piece, I think. You're going to see a kind of choreographed movement that's neither ballet nor traditional musical comedy dance. But you're going to see action in movement. That was what was new about West Side Story.
I think Jerry Robbins' choreography is an authorship in that show. I don't think all choreography always is, but certainly in that show. The marriage of dance movement and storytelling was new to the theater.
Jerome Robbins was the prime example of the idea that someone could direct and choreograph a Broadway musical, that they weren't two separate jobs to be given to two different people, but that the whole thing could move as one. Other people had done it before him, for instance, Agnes DeMille, and he took things like the idea of the Dream Ballet, Oklahoma, and applied it to the whole piece.
En la década de 1950, mientras el coreógrafo Jerome Robbins dejaba su impronta en Broadway con shows como The King and I y Peter Pan, estaba creando además su proyecto preferido, convertir en un musical un clásico de Shakespeare, Romeo y Julieta.
Tonight, tonight, it all began tonight. I saw you and the world went away. Tonight, tonight, there's only you tonight. What you...
I read it and I said, what the hell would I do to try to make this alive? And I thought, well, what if I made it today? How would I feel about it? And that was it. That's all I needed, and bang, I was into it.
I know now I was wrong.
Robbins colaboró con el dramaturgo Arthur Lawrence y el compositor Leonard Bernstein, y ubicaron la tragedia en la guerra de pandillas de Nueva York.
There was one area where we did break new ground, and that is in the subject matter. That was the beginning of it being okay to die, to be raped, to be murdered in a musical. At the same time, Lenny Bernstein's music was different from anybody who has ever written for musical theater. I think it's the most exciting thing about West Side Story. It has a vitality, an energy, an originality, and it says America to me.
Life
can be bright in America.
If you can fight in America.
Life is alright in America.
If you're all white in America.
The show is driven by the music. It's intense from beginning to end. It is a mixture of Wagner, Stravinsky, Mahler, Mambo, Broadway. It's all rolled into one. It packs a punch.
In bringing his great talent as a symphonic composer, Leonard Bernstein made a kind of score that had rhythms that people just hadn't had on Broadway. And then you have the genius of Robin's choreography and direction. The influences, inspirations are still so potent today in its clothing and its look and its stylization. I think that West Side Story was the forerunner of all MTV with its style, putting people stylized dancing in the middle of streets, as in the movie.
Cuando se estrenó West Side Story en 1957, recibió críticas muy diversas. De hecho, el éxito de Broadway aquella temporada fue The Music Man, que presentaba un tipo de baile muy distinto en el gimnasio.
People walk out on shows, and those are very often the shows that become historical. And if you told them, you know, you walked out on West Side Story in 1957, I did not. Yes, you did, and you walked out with 98 other people every night that the show ran on Broadway. No kidding, right. And a few years later, it was, you know, West Side Story.
West Side Story no solo llevó decididamente temas sin tradición al escenario de Broadway, sino que introdujo un nuevo tipo de director coreógrafo que insistía en artistas capaces de bailar, cantar y actuar. Además, el show unió a dos ambiciosos amigos con talento: Harold Prince, un productor de 29 años que quería dirigir, y un letrista de 27 años, Stephen Sondheim, que quería componer.
I just wanted to meet Leonard Bernstein. I called Oscar Hammerstein, and I said, you know, I don't want to do just lyrics for anything. I want to write music. And he said, I think it would be a very good idea for you. He said, it'll frustrate you about writing music, but these are professionals and distinguished ones, Robbins and Bernstein and Lawrence, and I think you would learn a lot. So I did, and I did learn a lot.
We were good friends. And it's true, we sat in Walgreens drugstore and ate bacon, lettuce, tomato sandwiches and talked about the theater and what we'd like to do in it.
Hal Prince tardaría 13 años en dirigir un musical de Stephen Sondheim, pero juntos volverían a imaginarse qué podía cantar un musical en Broadway. A finales de los 50 y principios de los 60, se produjeron algunos de los musicales más memorables de Broadway. Gypsy, con Ethel Merman como una autoritaria madre del mundo del espectáculo. Bye Bye Birdie, una parodia sobre Elvis Presley y los peligros del rock and roll. Camelot, la historia del rey Arturo que quedó indeleblemente relacionado a la presidencia de Kennedy. Y How to Succeed It in Business Without Really Trying, que satirizaba la cultura corporativa estadounidense. 1964 fue un año crucial, con Barbara Streisand inmortalizando el papel de Fanny Brice en Funny Girl.
Special people. They're the luckiest people living.
Aquella misma temporada, Carol Channing fue la estrella del nostálgico Hello, Dolly. A Channing la siguió un desfile de leyendas del teatro musical en el papel protagonista: Pearl Bailey, Ethel Merman y Mary Martin, que llevó el show a Vietnam para entretener a las tropas estadounidenses. Pero el mayor éxito de 1964, que batió el récord como show representado ininterrumpidamente durante más tiempo en Broadway, fue el más insólito tal vez: El violinista en el tejado.
If I were a rich man, all day long I'd bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. If I were a pretty rich,
Basado en los relatos cortos en los que Sholom Aleichem describía una aldea judía en la Rusia de 1905, Fiddler fue la última obra original que Jerome Robbins creó para Broadway.
The key to making Fiddler work was Jerome Robbins' idea. I can't tell you how many meetings we had where he said, "What is this story about?" And one of us said, "It's about the changing of a way of life, of a set of traditions." Robbins got very excited and he said, "Well, if it's about tradition, then we have to have an opening number which tells the audience what some of these traditions are."
Tradition, 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 tradition.
Tradition, it's this, it's that, it's everyone standing in a row, holding hands. This is the way we live, this is what we believe in. And those traditions are going to be broken. Fiddler is about that.
I remember the day that I registered at college, Fiddler on the Roof opened on Broadway. We didn't realize it at the time. It was the sunset of the old-style Broadway musical that came in with Rodgers and Hammerstein. The opening number, Tradition, was actually about the closing of an era of the Broadway musical. The curtain rose on Fiddler, but it came down on that kind of show.
It was really the advent of rock and roll that pushed Broadway musical out of the mainstream of American culture, because up until then, Broadway music had been the top 40, the top 10 hit parade music of the country, and that started to change. And by the late 1960s, it was a done deal.
Hello, Daddy. This is Nurse Daddy.
En 1964, la interpretación de Hello, Dolly por parte de Louis Armstrong pasó una semana encabezando las listas, interrumpiendo así la racha de 3 meses seguidos de los Beatles.
Keep blowing, still growing, you still going strong.
Fue una de las últimas veces que Broadway tuvo una canción que llegara al número 1 en el siglo XX.
Well, the culture is definitely shifting, but Broadway was basically trying to ignore the 60s. The typical musical at the height of the Vietnam War could be something like How Now, Dow Jones, you know, or George M. Shows that are promises that have absolutely nothing to do with the main culture of the moment. It was really the consummation of Broadway musical falling out of sync with pop culture.
En 1966, las protestas y manifestaciones se convirtieron en una presencia inevitable en los Estados Unidos. Hal Prince, que ahora dirigía shows, se inspiró en la lucha por los derechos civiles para preparar una nueva obra con músicas y letras de John Kander y Fred Epp.
It was very stormy in our country when I started to work on Cabaret. And I brought in a photograph from Life magazine, a two-page spread of a bunch of Aryan Nazi boys snarling at the camera. And of course, it was in our country, and it was them snarling at some poor little black girl. So I used that to support the contention that wherever human beings are, terrible things potentially can happen.
Cabaret era una adaptación de las historias de Berlín de Christopher Isherwood y una obra basada en ellas. El show representaba el libertinaje de Berlín entre las guerras y el ascenso de los nazis al poder, presentados por un maestro de ceremonias en el Kit Kat Club.
I was in the army in 1949 in Germany. I went to a little nightclub called Maxime's, which was in the cellar of a bombed-out church. And there, a very diminutive MC came out with lipstick on his mouth and eyelashes and rouge to hide how really old he was.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Fremde, étranger, stranger. Glücklich zu sehen, just wie enchanté. Happy to see you, bleibe reste stay.
Joel Gray, made up in a way that even if you knew what he looked like, he'd be unrecognizable, comes out and starts singing a song that we all know now as Willkommen. But my friend Sarah Fishko and I looked at each other and said, is this show in German? We didn't know what it was. It was very out there, and it had all this sort of androgynous sexuality. It was mind-blowing. And the audience was baffled. It had a stronger effect on me than Fiddler 2 years earlier had, or Hello, Dolly. You felt you were seeing something completely different.
Cabaret, I would say, pushed the envelope of what people were seeing in the Broadway musical. Most people thought it was a terrible idea, a musical about Nazi Germany, but Hal and John and Fred and Joe Masteroff had this very dark vision, and they found a framework in terms of the cabaret songs in which the musical numbers commented on the action.
Boris Aronson did the original set. Nobody's ever been greater designer than Boris Aronson. There were two musicals on stage. One took place in real rooms and one took place in limbo. And in limbo were these numbers which indirectly commented on the real book upstage. Somewhere in the middle of the second act, Sally Bowles leaves the real world, walks through a mylar curtain into the unreal limbo world, and sings Cabaret.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum.
At the end of that song, she goes and gets an abortion. What she's found out at the beginning of the song is that she's pregnant. What she decides at the end of the song is that she doesn't want to have the baby.
Right this way, our table's waiting. Start by admitting.
That's a pretty powerful material for a Broadway musical comedy.
I think that the thing that you have to take on board is the profound disruption of Vietnam.
This is the dawning of the age.
And the awareness of the American public that they were in this terrible war that they couldn't get out of, that they really was not winnable, and it was on some level probably unjust. In song and theater, there was a great deal of protest against the war. And it divided the culture.
En 1967, la guerra de Vietnam y las protestas contra ella polarizaban el país. Dos actores jóvenes, Jerome Ragney y James Reido, aprovecharon aquella fricción como nuevo argumento para una producción musical. Para darles apoyo contaron con Joseph Papp, un productor independiente que acababa de crear en el centro de Public Theatre un espacio cultural no comercial. Conocido por presentar a Shakespeare en Central Park, Papp era además un defensor del teatro contemporáneo.
Vietnam was a major plot point in the show, but the war wasn't really the main thing. The main thing was the lifestyle. It seemed to be more about hippies. Growing their hair long and living wearing different kind of clothes.
Gimme a head with hair, long beautiful hair, shining, gleaming, steaming, flaxen, waxen.
El show se llamaba Hair. Fue el primer musical de Broadway en el que toda la música era de rock.
I'd never seen a Broadway musical when I wrote Hair. I like funky music. So that was and when they said, well, we want a rock and roll score, I said, well, to me, that's what I do.
Hair was the first show that allowed the generation gap that had appeared at this point in time when civil protest, rock and roll, and dope, all of it arrived at the same time. Somehow at this show, parents went because they wanted to understand their kids. Kids went because they wanted to show their parents what it was. It filled that gap very, very well.
Every singer, dancer, hippie, panther, you name it, we were all online waiting to audition for this show. And we went into a series of rehearsals like I'd never seen before, unlike any other theatrical show I think I've worked on. We did a lot of exercises dealing with caring for one another, loving one another, in order to be loving to the audience.
We starve, look at one another, short of breath, walking proudly in our winter coats, wearing smells from laboratories, facing our dying nation.
Una vez completada su temporada off-Broadway, el show pasó primero a una discoteca llamada The Cheetah, y luego, con un nuevo director al timón, Tom O'Horgan, Hair pasó al Baltimore Theatre. El consumo de drogas, un lenguaje obsceno, un reparto que se entremezclaba con el público y la desnudez frontal formaban parte importante del éxito más reciente de Broadway.
I think it affected a lot of people. People still come up to me, and say that it changed their life. But I don't know if it changed Broadway very much. I mean, we had our little day in the sun and then we retired.
Hair se representó en Broadway durante 4 años a teatro lleno. Junto con sus canciones de éxito duradero, el show ayudó a establecer al mundo ajeno a Broadway y al Public Theatre de Joe Papp como importantes y nuevos protagonistas del desarrollo del teatro musical comercial.
Another 100 people just got off of the train and came up through the ground while another 100 people just got off of the bus and are looking around at another 100 people who city of strangers. Some come to work, some to play. A city of strangers.
Really wasn't until Steve Sondheim came along with Company that somebody was able to take all the stuff that had happened before, the Rodgers and Hammerstein influence, the director influence, the choreographer influence, all that stuff, and morph into something new that sort of said, okay, that's that, now we're into another.
A finales de los años 60, Stephen Sondheim había colaborado en 6 shows de Broadway. Tras West Side Story, continuó escribiendo letras para otro hito, Gypsy, y luego escribió letras y música para una serie de shows, incluido Golfus de Roma. En 1970, Sondheim se unió a Hal Prince en Company y lanzaron al musical a una nueva era. El show estaba basado en un grupo de obras breves de George Firth que dramatizaban las realidades de la vida matrimonial en Nueva York.
It's the little things you do together, that make perfect relationships. The hobbies you pursue together, savings you accrue together, looks you misconstrue together, that make marriage a joy.
Company does deal with upper middle class people with upper middle class problems. Broadway theater has been for many years supported by those people. They really want to escape, and here we're saying, bring it right back in their faces. What they've been trying to, what they came to a musical to avoid, they suddenly find facing them on the stage.
It's not so hard to be married.
It's much the simplest of crimes.
It's not so hard to be married.
I've done it 3 or 4 times.
Además del provocativo tema central, Sondheim y Prince también retaban al público con la deconstrucción del argumento del musical.
Probably the major thing that made Company controversial was that there was no plot. The audience kept waiting for a plot.
We played with nonlinear storytelling. Obviously, I had preceded it with Cabaret, which was both linear and nonlinear. Now we made our way right into a whole nonlinear evening.
The notion of a series of snapshots in a man's life taking place in a metaphysical birthday party, and it keeps changing and flowing back and forth, and you don't know if the guests know each other, and there's a girl in a bridal gown, and it's all very weird.
Pardon me, is everybody here? Because if everybody's here, I want to thank you all for coming to the wedding. I appreciate you going even more. I mean, you must know it's a better thing to do and not a word of what you call. I'm Paul, you know the man I'm going to marry, but I'm not because it wouldn't ruin anyone as wonderful as he is.
Thank you all for the gifts and the flowers. Thank you all. Now it's back to the showers. Don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today.
El reparto de Company habitaba un mundo urbano abstracto y viajaba en un ascensor que funcionaba dentro del decorado del gimnasio selvático de Boris Aronson. Las canciones del show no surgían de escenas como en los musicales tradicionales, sino que proporcionaban comentarios sobre los personajes o sus situaciones.
All the numbers in Company are inserted like nuts into a fruitcake. They're inserted into the scenes, or they occupy, as in the case of Barcelona, the whole scene. But none of them just arises out of dialogue the way, I'd been trained to do by Oscar Hammerstein.
Where you going?
Barcelona.
Oh,
Don't get up.
do you have to?
Yes, I have to.
Oh,
Don't get up.
Cuando se estrenó Company en abril de 1970, su visión cínica de las relaciones y el matrimonio modernos polarizó al público de Broadway.
Musicals for decades have had no doubts about if you find the right person, you may go the rocky road of love, but it would always lead to so-called happy ending. We were saying something ambiguous, which is actually there are no endings. It keeps going on, is what really Company's about.
Broadway was always about fun, about joy, whereas the city was a plaything for Gershwin. In Sondheim's world, it's a place where you lose things, where you can't find yourself, where you're alienated. where another 100 people come out of the subway. So it's an ambivalent ending. But I think to the extent that those endings are earned, they are more mature and more interesting to sing about.
Oh, well, I guess. Okay.
What?
I'll stay.
They still want a happy ending. And a happy ending can have a lot of people dead, like West Side Story, but it's still a happy ending.
A principios de los 70, Nueva York, al igual que el resto de Estados Unidos, estaba sumida en una profunda recesión, y en ningún sitio era más evidente que en la Gran Vía Blanca.
This area in the 70s was a sewer. This was the den of pornography, prostitution, felony crime, drug dealing, you name it.
Lo que Broadway necesitaba era un éxito. Esta vez no llegaría de manos de una gran estrella, sino de los actores secundarios, los bailarines, los que se autodenominaban gitanos y que eran la columna vertebral de un musical.
Of course, dancers on Broadway are blue-collar workers. It's a life commitment, and it's something that either you have inside of you and you have to do it, or maybe you should go sell hamburgers instead, because it's not for sissies, contrary to popular belief.
Fue un ex gitano quien le volvió a dar fuerza a Broadway, haciendo del baile algo tan popular que los calientapiernas se pusieron de moda. Michael de Filia actuó por primera vez con una compañía ambulante de West Side Story, pero en Broadway se hizo conocido como Michael Bennett.
I met Michael on Hullabaloo, a TV variety show, in 1964. One day, we're dancing side by side, and we're bringing the jerk to new heights, and I say, Michael, what are you gonna do when you grow up? You can't keep doing this the rest of your life. Did you ever think of that, huh? And he said, yes, I'm gonna be a choreographer. And I went, oh, good luck. Don't forget about me.
Bennett consiguió su primer trabajo como coreógrafo en Broadway en 1966. Luego pasó a poner en escena números de baile en Company y con Hal Prince compartió la dirección del siguiente musical de Sondheim, Follies. En 1973, Bennett empezó a trabajar en su propio show. Sin ningún argumento preexistente, realizó una serie de talleres en los que grabó a los bailarines hablando de sus experiencias.
When we started a chorus line, it was called the Dancers Project, and it was a secret. We would start every day with a blank page, and our lives were a part of the process.
You know, this was the first time there was such a thing as a workshop, and we were young guys, and we were all just desperate to put on something very special, very new. All we talked about is let's do something on Broadway like they've never seen before.
Again. Step, kick, kick.
Con el apoyo de Joseph Papp, Bennett pasó 18 meses preparando el musical, algo sin precedentes. El argumento surgió de los bailarines que hacían pruebas para un nuevo show.
That connects with turn, turn, out, in, jump, step, step, kick, kick, leap, kick, touch. Got it? Going on. 5, 6, 7, 8, a turn, turn, touch.
In the beginning, there was a very difficult balance between making this about dancers but not making this about dancers.
5, 6, 7, 8, a turn, turn, touch, down.
At what point can you get away from the dancer metaphor and get into the world of we're all on a line, we're all in this together?
Who am I anyway? Am I my resume? So many faces all around, and here we go. I need this job. Oh God, I need this show.
That did not happen until one day in rehearsal that Michael Bennett took a chalk and went wham and drew a line on the floor. And he said, that's the line. We're all on the line. Well, now the common denominator of all these people is, God, I hope I get it. I hope I get it. Well, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
I'll never make it. I'll never make it. He doesn't like the way I look. He doesn't like the way I dance. He doesn't like the way
Everyone has dreams and hopes, and there was something in that show for everybody. Men who were just retired would write me letters and say, your character made me go out and start a new business. Football players would say, the line. They would talk about the line, being on the line.
Lo más espectacular para el final del show. Bennett transformó un clásico final en línea de Broadway en un comentario agridulce sobre la vida de una bailarina.
Had an entire 2 hours talking about these individual people and that all this torture they have to go through to get a job, to be on Broadway, is to be in an assembly line. That was the genius of Michael. He gave the audience what they expected. What he meant was something else.
A Chorus Line se estrenó en el Public Theater y rápidamente pasó al Schubert, en Broadway, en julio de 1975. Siguió allí durante 15 años, batiendo todos los récords de taquilla existentes.
Michael Bennett and the Chorus Line totally changed the musical theater. It really saved the financial fortunes of the Schubert organization. It was a catalyst for the improvement of this area, and of course this area now is the most desirable area in New York.
I saw a chorus line at the Schubert Theater in Chicago. I was in the last row of the last balcony. I saw the show. I went back to my dancing school, to my teacher, and I said, you've got to teach me to do turn, turn, out, in, jump, step, which was in the opening combination. 2 years later, I auditioned, I got the show, and I went on tour with the show. And when I went on the first time, and I was doing the opening combination, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder who's in the back row. True story.
Al mismo tiempo que A Chorus Line llegaba a Broadway, un nuevo musical iba a ser puesto en escena por otro bailarín convertido en director, Bob Fosse. En 1973 se convirtió en la única persona que ha logrado la triple corona de dirección: el Emmy por Liza con Z, el Tony por Pippin y el Oscar por Cabaret.
Being characteristically a pessimist and cynic, this and some of the other nice things that have happened to me in the last couple of days may turn me into some sort of hopeful optimist and ruin my whole life.
Fosse era un veterano del mundo del espectáculo. Había empezado a bailar de niño en un número llamado The Reeve Brothers y había ascendido hasta llegar a bailar en Broadway y en Hollywood.
When I first met him, he auditioned to be a dancer in movies, and he had no idea he was going to be a choreographer. And in my opinion, he was going to be as good a song and dance man as Kelly and Astaire. I thought, Fosse, this guy is going to be it.
El distinto estilo de Fosse quedó de manifiesto en el primer musical que coreografió, llamado The Pajama Game. Mientras trabajaba en su siguiente producción, Damn Yankees, conoció a Gwen Verdon y terminó creando 5 shows para ella. Verdon se convirtió en la bailarina Fosse por excelencia y con el tiempo también en su esposa.
Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? Who's got the pain when they go up? Who's got the pain when they do the mambo? I don't know who. Do you?
He loved women. He loved to make them look beautiful. I think Gwen was the sexiest of them all because she had this angelic innocence about her.
Durante las 2 décadas siguientes, Fosse refinó el estilo que lo caracterizaba.
I suppose if you repeat something enough times, it's called a style, you know. I started with hats because I began losing my hair very early. And I've always been slightly round-shouldered, and so I started to exaggerate that, and I don't have what the ballet dancers call a turnout. So I started turning my feet in, and I guess that's the style they talk about.
When you see his work, you know immediately that it's Fosse. Like if you see a Picasso, you know that it is Picasso. The lowering of the shoulders, the curved shoulder, the small pelvis work.
En 1975, Fosse creó un musical basado en una historia de asesinato y corrupción de la época de la ley seca. Recurrió al equipo de composición de Kander y Ebb, y juntos reforzaron los elementos que tenía para el mundo del espectáculo. La obra más duradera de Fosse para Broadway se llamaría Chicago.
They asked me if I knew how to adapt, because it was a very straight play, if I had any ideas of how to musicalize it. And so I came up with the vaudeville concept.
Aunque Chicago estaba ambientado en el pasado, el show satirizaba con dureza a una Norteamérica obsesionada por el asesinato, el sexo y la fama. El abogado Billy Flynn hará cualquier cosa por $1, pero dice todo lo contrario.
I don't care about expensive things, cashmere coats, diamond rings don't mean a thing. All I care about is love. That's what I'm here for.
He's a phony, and he comes out and sings a phony song about a phony emotion, and he doesn't mean it for a minute, and you can tell.
But all I care about is love.
That's what he's here for.
Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-boo-boo-boo. Ba-ba-ba-ba-boo.
It's an indictment of our pop culture, really.
All I care about is love.
Chicago had a style of black humor. It's almost like cabaret. There's a lot harking back to vaudeville and to burlesque, but always with that cynicism.
When Chicago opened in '75, it got very mixed reviews. Now the show is looked on as some sort of icon. And the fact is, it's the same music, the same text, the same lyrics, the same orchestrations.
People went in expecting to see a vaudeville, a happy thing, and it was very dark. I don't think the public was really ready for it. And of course, it opened 5 days after Chorus Line, which made it very tough on the reviews. And like I say, it was a little ahead of its time.
We see his legacy living today. We see it in the film Chicago. We see it in the show Fosse. We see it everywhere. You see it in fashion, you see it on television, you see it in commercials. You see people every now and then with a black hat or so that doing his style. That's the mark of a true artist.
I was younger then.
Tell him what I see.
I am in a tree, I am 10. I am in a tree.
I was younger then.
En 1976, durante la celebración del bicentenario del país, Stephen Sondheim y Hal Prince estaban explorando el lado oscuro del imperialismo estadounidense en Pacific Overtures. Ambientada en el Japón del siglo XIX, la historia de John Whiteman era contada por un reparto de actores asiáticos en su totalidad, al estilo kabuki.
I saw everything. I was someone in the tree. Tell him what I see.
It was a daring, courageous thing we did, and we were extremely proud of it, and it was a success. It was a flop, but it was a success.
Durante los años 70, Sondheim y Prince desafiaron los optimistas convencionalismos del musical. La nostalgia teatral se volvió amarga en Follies. Y una opereta con toda la música en un compás de 3x4, música para una noche de verano, estaba llena de ansiedad. En 1979 convirtieron lo inimaginable en un musical de Broadway. Era una historia de masacres y canibalismo ambientada en el Londres del siglo XIX, en la que aparecía el barbero asesino, Sweeney Todd.
I thought it would be fun to see if you can scare a contemporary audience the way movies can scare you.
Attend the tale of Sweeney Todd. His skin was pale and his eye was hard. He shaved the faces of gentlemen who never thereafter were heard of again. He trod a path that you have trod. It's Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street.
We always wanted to go somewhere fresh and new. Sweeney Todd didn't hurt people's feelings. It was meant to thrill you. I'm much more interested in having an experience in the theater which is unlike the experience I'm having on the street.
In the opening number, having the rumbling music is very low, and I put it in as low a key as possible, this feeling. Now, right, and always with a slight crescendo. So there's always a little leaning in, as if something's about to happen and then doesn't. So the feeling is of lifting the voice a little bit and then dropping them, lifting, dropping. That may seem subtleties that nobody gets, but it creates a mood. And I don't think anybody would argue that the opening moments of this play are very creepy indeed.
Attend the tale of Sweeney Todd. He served a dark and a vengeful God. What happened then? Well, that's the play, and he wouldn't want us to give it away. Not Sweeney. Not Sweeney Todd. The demon barber of Fleet Street.
Sweeney Todd es la espeluznante historia de un barbero condenado falsamente de un delito que regresa a Londres en busca de venganza. Los cadáveres de sus víctimas desaparecen convertidos en sabrosos pasteles de carne.
Here we are, dear, hot out of the oven.
What is that?
It's crisp. Have a little taste.
Is it really good?
Sir, it's too good, at least. Then again, they don't commit sins of the flesh, so it's pretty fresh.
The last line of the first act of Bond's play says they fall into each other's arms with laughter. And I thought, gee, that's a moment to sing about. And what are they laughing at? And then I thought, They're laughing at the prospect of what people will taste like.
This one might be a bit stringy, but then of course it's a fiddle player.
Oh, no, this isn't fiddle player. It's piccolo player.
How can you tell?
It's piping hot.
That's no one at first.
History of the world, my sweet.
Mr. Todd, what does it tell?
Here's who gets eaten and who gets to eat.
Mr. Todd, too, Mr. Todd, who gets the sound?
But fortunately, it's also clear that everybody goes down well with beer.
La sombría visión de Sondheim había llevado al musical a donde el público se podía identificar con una historia de asesinato y canibalismo. Mientras las arias entrecruzadas llegan a su punto culminante, Sweeney Todd representa su venganza sobre la sociedad.
And if you're beautiful, what then? With yellow hair like wheat, I think we shall not meet.
Revenge is universal, whether people will admit it or not. And that's what the piece is about. It's about revenge. And I think the audience senses that and they identify with Sweeney Todd.
Goodbye, Joanna. You're gone and yet you're mine. I'm fine, Joanna. I'm fine.
Musicals have always tried to keep the dark side of the culture out of the frame. Sondheim was the first person to try to sing about that darkness. The ultimate expression of that in his work would be Sweeney Todd, which is, I think, a masterpiece.
And in that darkness when I'm blind with what I can't forget, it's always morning in my mind, my little lamb.
He had a complete disregard, courageous disregard for what the public is maybe going to like or not like. Audience should damn well work a little harder and listen, even if the subject matter is distasteful to some people.
Desde trágicas peleas con navajas en West Side Story hasta vengativos degüellos en Sweeney Todd, las colaboraciones Sondheim-Prince se mantuvieron en la cúspide de un período que redefinió la tradición musical de Broadway. A finales de la década de 1970, inspirándose en el éxito de A Chorus Line, Broadway se convirtió en la pieza central de una nueva campaña de relaciones públicas diseñada para atraer a los turistas a Nueva York.
There's only one Broadway. It's in New York.
I love New York.
En constante ascenso, la industria turística ha dominado Broadway, favoreciendo las reposiciones y el entretenimiento nostálgico. Pero los shows de más éxito en años venideros, de hecho los de mayor éxito de la historia de Broadway, llegaron de teatros londinenses en los que un joven productor británico descubrió la forma de convertir el musical americano en un verdadero fenómeno internacional.
I love New York at night. You never know who might appear.